G'day to YouTube and welcome to this episode of the Gunman. So this video here, I'm going to be taking you guys through the paintwork on this Ford Ranger. As you can see, it's a fairly straightforward job. It had a bit of, it probably got keyed, or there was a decent sized scratch down here. So we're just going to flick in both doors, flick into the guard, and we decided to do that just so we didn't have any colour difference. I did match the colour. It turns out the colour was actually fine off the machine. Now, this is one thing I wanted to point out to you guys, that previously, all I was doing is 1.5 coats application, which is what the Cromax and Axalta guys will tell you. They'll say every single colour, 1.5 coats, you'll get your coverage. In the real world, that doesn't work. So I was doing funny blends. I had some blends that was sort of turning out a little bit dark, and you get these funny halos around the edge. What it turned out to be is that, okay, that's well and good over your primed area. If you use, say, a light primer, whatever value shade they tell you to use, then the color's going to be fine over that. But as soon as you've got your full coverage, it's going to darken up. So that's 1.5 coats. It was actually really light, so you can actually see through to the black there. Whereas there, with that extra couple of coats, the colour has darkened up, and that colour is fine. I'm confident enough with it that I can actually go edge to edge to this part there without blending into that quarter panel. I'm making the job bigger than it probably really needs to be, just for a couple of scratches on the doors. So they did come out, they did help me with some application. I was probably moving a little bit too slow on my tech coat, but what I'm going to tell you guys now with these colours, put an extra coat on. I would sooner paint a colour that is fully covered, not relying on a ground coat underneath to be showing through to get that coverage, because as I say, the blend areas are going to be an issue. Now that would all be well and good also if they actually had colour cards that were guaranteed to be exactly the same colour as their value shaded primers. So let's just say this is a number 4 primer there, but they actually, Axalta don't actually have spray out cards, which I personally said is a bit of a chink in the colour matching scheme that they have. Let's just say this bumper bar here that's black, you know. So I'm going to be putting some value shade number 4 primer over that, or whatever. I'll have a look at the colour and see whichever value shade it asks for. But there's no colour card. That am I going to sit down every Monday and spray out, you know, 100 colour cards for each different value shade? In the real world, it's not going to happen. I'm just going to put an extra coat of your base coat on. So anyway, I guess we'll get into it. The whole job has been prepped up, obviously. Finished it off with 1000 grit. I've found that this Cromax Pro, you need to go a little bit further with your prep work. Where I used to use 800 grit, now I use 1000 grit. So I can still use 800 grit on the orbital sander, because on the orbital sander it seems to be a little bit finer than hand sanding. But if I was to go over those edges with 800 grit, say around all these areas, then you would definitely run the risk of having some sanding scratches. So yeah, 1000 grit pads is what I recommend, and it definitely works well. You probably could use grey Scotch Brite, but I sort of lean away from that stuff. I don't really like it. I actually didn't do the prep work on this. It was my partner in crime while I was painting the previous job. But anyway, I'm doing that bumper bar at the same time, obviously. One thing that's pretty cool about the system we've got, you can actually print labels out. So there's some good information on those labels, like the value shade, as I was saying before. You'll be able to see there, that's VS5. So now I'll know when I go to put the value shaded primer on the bumper bar, I'll mix up the number 5. I personally don't like to do it on the bodies of cars. If I was going to, say, paint this job and put some non-sanding or value shaded primer down, what's going to happen is that primer is going to be coming inside that edge, and then there's no guarantee that your paint's going to follow it. Whereas if I just put colour over there, yep, the colour's going to go in there, the clear's going to go in there, and you're not going to get that primer edge in there. And 99% of the time, it's good enough, and you don't even have to sort of puff that edge in, which is just a pain in the ass. And then you're sort of masking off your fresh clear, and the car's going, and it's just creating extra work. So yeah, I just go for coverage over that. I'm just going to put that extra coat on it, and we'll blend it out, and yeah, hopefully it all goes well. I do have a few little tips that we can do if the blend looks a bit funny, but it looks like he's actually cut through here, so the blend is going to come fairly far up, but I'm confident in the colour anyway. We can actually mix some of the base coat blender, which is in this gun here, so it's good practice and pretty much necessary, I actually think, to have a separate gun for the base coat blender. and also mix your color up as the blending option, which all that really does is actually mixes some of that into your color. But in doing that, you're actually losing coverage, because it's basically just clear base coat. It's the water-based version of the clear base coat. So you're just diluting that color down, and you're actually just, yeah, making it cover worse. So that's why I say put that extra coat on. Since I've been doing that and sort of applying it a little bit better, slowing down on that control coat, I've been getting some much better results. Anyway, I'll stop talking. I am here to work. I shouldn't be sitting around here talking. So yeah, we'll get into it and give it a good tack rag. I'd just like to quickly say that not all colours you will need to do the extra coat with. So most colours they will cover in the 1.5 coats. But it's these silvers, as I was saying, just especially that you've done the blending option and you've mixed that base coat blender in with it, you're going to be losing coverage. And then I get this other guy saying, oh no, you shouldn't mix it with the base coat blender. The thing is with this system, there seems to be 10 different painters. You'll ask them and then you'll get 10 totally different answers with it. I've been trying to follow the books. I've been trying to follow exactly what the tech reps have been telling me to do. It hasn't been working. I've been forced to step outside of what they actually recommend doing, and my results have been improving. So the first coat of base coat is just about dry. You can see there's still a few patches it's not fully dry. When I was putting that on, I was thinking, oh geez, you know what? I probably wouldn't have needed to put the extra coat on, but now it's drying and I'm having a closer look at it, I can definitely see that there's a few bits that aren't actually quite covered there. I'm glad I did put the extra coat on, and I'm not making this video to badmouth Cromax Pro at all. I love this paint system, but it's just a few things that I'm beginning to learn about it. I didn't really notice, and I was doing the right thing at the start. I was trying to follow their guidelines by the book, but at the end of the day, they weren't working. I wasn't getting the proper results with it. That's why I'm here, to tell you guys real world results and how to actually use the stuff properly. So with those silvers and some of those colors, you've just got to be careful. Any darker colors, you're fine. Even with that beige color, you know, you'd probably be okay. You wouldn't really need to put that extra coat over it because it doesn't have the blending clear in it, or what do they call it? The 2091 is what it is, and that's the base coat blender. So there's none of that in it to sort of help it lay down. You're not diluting it with that clear base, transparent base coat. But I'm going to give that a couple more minutes. I'm then going to tack rag over the edges because I've probably got a little bit of misty overspray. I'll then put my base coat blender over here. We'll then put our 1.5 coats on, carry it on as if it was a normal job, and yeah, happy days. So I can actually still see that patch where the primer was. I'd also like to make a quick mention that since making the start of that video and actually getting it into my video editor, the part where I mentioned that they don't have the value shaded spray out cards, I believe I was wrong, because I asked my local paint distributor, Park Automotives over here in Perth, if they have the spray out cards that are actually the exact same color as the value shade primers that we use. He said no, we don't. Whereas I've actually made a post mentioning that on Facebook and on Instagram, and a couple of the guys on Facebook ended up saying that they actually do have value shaded spray out cards. So I'll definitely be seeing if I'm able to get them in, because hey, as I say before, who's going to sit down on Monday morning for an hour and spray your own value shaded spray out cards? I personally think it's just not really going to happen. But there you go, this is the blending stage. Silvers can be a bit of a prick to blend with this stuff because of the coverage. Mainly you're getting nearly too much coverage, so you can just about see every single dot of metallic. Now, it's not to mean that I can't blend it or I'm a hack at blending it. I think it's more on the side of me actually being quite critical of my own work. And just because a car goes and it's okay and the customer doesn't pick it and the boss doesn't pick it, it doesn't mean that I don't see it. I'm always trying to better myself as a tradesman, and I found it a lot easier using the solvent-based base coats to lay them down without getting mottle and blend. As far as the mottle goes though with this, I have just about nailed it, as I've mentioned in previous videos. So you put this first coat on nice and wet, don't allow it to dry, and then you go with your second coat, which is just that control coat where you hold it right back, and then you go quite slow. So I think some people have said 75% overlap. I personally don't really know how you would even measure that. I guess it's just something that you'd have to measure by eye, so I can't really say an exact overlap that I'm doing, but you've still got to go quite slow. I guess that the worst thing that can happen when you're spraying this stuff is having it dry while you're spraying it, which is why people have troubles with this stuff in low humidity and high temperature areas. So if you put that stuff and it dries straight away, when you go and put your control coat over, you're going to get mottle. But yeah, just keep in mind that that extra coat that I put down, that is totally outside of the book. They will not tell you that you're allowed to do that, but until I can get someone come in and show me how to do it properly and get coverage on these high metallics and be able to blend it, well, I'm just going to keep doing what works for me, and this has been working for me lately. I've been getting the results, and at the end of the day, that's what really matters. So, yep, I'm totally open-minded to learning things from whoever it be. I've been all over Instagram and Facebook, people trying to give me advice and that on how to use this stuff. But as I say, you'll get 10 different people telling you 10 different things, and this is just what works for me. Some people say don't put the base blender in. Some people say put 20% base blender in. Some people say put 30% base blender in. Some people say don't put any, do your blend, and then go over the top of that with a 50-50 mix of your base coat blender. Some people say don't put any base coat blender in, but put 5 to 10% water in, and they don't have any issues doing it that way. So that's base coat down. It's looking pretty good at this point. You really don't know until this stuff's dry how it's actually gonna look, but it seems to have blended out pretty nice. And from my experience, I'm pretty confident that that's gonna have no mottle in it either. Now, if that blend looked a bit funny, what we can do is mix. So this is 2091. There's a slow version of that, so that's your base coat blender in that A&I gun there. You can actually mix a 50-50 mix of the slow, so 2093 of that with your color, and you can just sort of treat it like solvent in a way. Don't go and smash it on, don't go and be shy, just sort of medium wet coats and just sort of go over that blend area, and it should sort of melt in. You're basically just diluting that base coat, really. You just have to be careful you don't take it up too far, because there's still enough colour in there to actually change the colour. Say if you were sort of doing this door here and your blend is around this section there, and you were to go and bring it up too far to the door, you will get a colour difference. But I've used it in the past once and it did work, and it's something that some of the guys around here have told me. Even a couple of you guys on the Instagram page, they've mentioned a few of those tricks. And yeah, I do love this paint, but it's just a few teething problems, you know. As I said before, I really was doing my best to follow their guidelines, but they're not working for me. I'm not going to use it. They're paid to sell their paint. They're paid to, you know, say a certain thing about their paint, even if they don't agree with it, which they probably do, you know, but they're not here spraying cars every day. I am. My job is to make these cars look good. And if I'm not getting those cars looking good using their methods, I'm going to step outside there. Okay, maybe I'm on my own. But I can't see the difference in putting one extra coat of base coat down. It's not really going to be a mega issue. You're not going to get any delamination issues or anything like that. I had one guy just on the Instagram page saying that putting an extra coat of base coat, you sort of lose the life out of your clear, but I can't really see any reason why that would happen, especially with the water base. Once it's dry, and I haven't been getting it anyway, so. I have noticed I've been using quite a fair bit of paint though. That's 500 mils just to paint that. Okay, yeah, they're decent sized doors. If that was solvent, I'd probably use 350, 400. That's before thinners, so around 500 mils ready for use. So around a similar end amount, but yeah, you're just putting the thinners in with the solvent. But don't forget, I was actually just saying to Carl the other day, I said, well, it doesn't necessarily mean that just because you're not putting the thinners in this stuff, thinners is still expensive basically. You're looking at $250, even $300 for the 15 litre glazer at thinners, depending, you know, what your discount is. You can see how it's sort of starting to dry down a bit. Just use that air blower lightly. Set it up on the angle. So here's a bit of a look at the car in the sun, and you can see that the silver's laid down quite nicely, and it's blended out over that guard definitely fairly nice. Like, being extremely critical on my own work, I can actually see a little bit of a blend there, but it's a definite pass. So as it turns out, this is something that probably happens in most panel shops on a weekly basis, a bit of poor communication. I was pulled over into the panel shop about this job and asked whether or not I wanted to paint that quarter panel. I asked the panel beater, why are we doing it? He said, oh, it's just a blend. And I said, hey, don't worry about it. I'll be able to get the color edge to edge. I'm pretty confident I'll be able to do that, and it's going to save us a bit of work. So as it turns out, there was a scratch in it that we were meant to fix. So I would usually, reading a job sheet, if it said paint on there, and I've actually specifically asked someone whether or not we're painting it or not, and they've said no, we're not, you would think word of mouth overwrites a job sheet, and that usually does in most panel shops. But yeah, as it turns out, I ended up having to paint this quarter panel, so I decided to include the footage of that too. Again, I'm putting that extra coat of base coat down. Again, nothing that they would ever tell you to do or that you're meant to do. They would say use your value shade primer and then just do your 1.5 coats. But yeah, I don't want to do that, because I would imagine that you probably get a little bit of a transparent spot, and also I don't like using wet on wet primer on blend panels because it's just a pain in the ass. You got to put fade out thinner over the edge, or you get that little bit of a halo effect around where the wet on wet primer is. So as you can see on that wheel arch section, I did end up putting a little bit of 1K primer, and that was at the value shade 4 primer. So that was just because it was bare steel. If it had have just gone just through to the base coat or the primer, I'd paint straight over it, and especially with this water base, you won't have any shrink back or fry up issues. So first up, I'm doing the base coat blender over this blend section of this quarter panel. Now usually I would actually have brought the color right up to that curve, and this curve down the bottom here, and that way you've got your color over most of the panel, and it's going to be kind of a good area to not see a blend. But as much as anything, I wanted to prove to myself that I can do blends on big flat panels. And as far as the video goes, I thought it would be a good way to show you guys how to do blends with this with silver metallics with this system. So they do say to do the blend area first, as you noticed me do then, and now I'm coming back over and putting the full color over the rest of the panel. I really can't see it making too much of a difference if you were to go and do the panel first and then do your blend last. As long as that base coat blender is still wet when you go to blend into it, it should be fine. So yeah, if you'd prefer to do that first and then you blend later, no worries, no biggie. Just remember to keep that overlap nice and tight, as you see me on this control coat here. Now I'm going to let this dry right down and do that method that I was telling you guys about before, how you mix your 50-50 mix of your color and then mix that with your base coat blender slow. So that's 2091 from memory is the number on it, and I'll go and show you guys when I'm mixing that up in the paint room too. I did do a video explaining all the materials and stuff that I was using quite a while ago when I started using this system first up. The blend here is actually quite a nice blend, however I can still see a little bit of something there. It's still not 100%, but putting that 50-50 mix of base coat blender and base coat over that edge definitely does improve those blends on silvers. You won't have any of these issues in any of the darker colors. So there's the two base coat blenders. You got 2093, that's the slow, and you got 2091, which is just your standard. So there you go, you can see I haven't got much color left, so I'm going to just put a little bit in, stir it up, have a look at it. Look, they do say mix it up exactly 50-50, some people say to do that, but yeah, I guess it probably doesn't have to be 100% mixture. It's as long as you've just diluted that color basically. And that's as I say before, the main thing that I was having with these silvers is that it covers so well that it's less of a blend than what it would have been with a solvent silver, because the solvent-based silvers are already that little bit more transparent, so you're actually going to find it a little bit easier to blend. I had that solvent stuff down to a T, and I would just about get no model on every single job and just about guarantee myself as a good blend. But yeah, I will say that the color match is another extremely important stage of getting any color to blend, because you're not going to blend black into white, are you? So yeah, the closer you get that color, the better you're going to have your blend looking. So this is that 50-50 mix or thereabouts, and just going over that blend area, just sort of a medium wet coat, just sort of, I guess, as you would with any solvent job, really. Yeah, you're not going on too heavy, you're not going on too light or anything like that, but again, just keep that overlap nice and tight, and you shouldn't have any dramas at all. Again, I'm not even sure if that's technically a recommended method by Axalta, but what the guys here in Australia were telling me is that it's a recommended procedure in the US, whereas they don't teach that in Australia. I've always been a firm believer in whatever gets results for you, and if you're happy with spraying in a certain way, well then go for it. The main reason I was trying to follow the book is that it's a new product for me, and I didn't really want to step outside of the guidelines. That way, if anything went wrong, I'd be able to turn around and say, hey, this is the way you've told me to use it, it's not working, and it's all sort of back on them. But yeah, I've just been doing it my own way these days, and it's working, and I can't really see any big issues with it. I can't imagine it's going to lead to any sort of delamination or anything like that. If I did think it was, I wouldn't be doing it. It's as simple as that. Onto the clear coat stage, just for this quarter panel. It turns out that when I thought I was recording the clear coat stage on the rest of the car, I wasn't. The camera is turned off, but it was sitting on my GoPro on my head. So not a big deal. You got a little bit of clear coat stage in here. So again, it's the GTI Pro Light, the T20 air cap, and 1.3mm fluid tip on it. That beautiful blue that Spray Guns Direct was so kindly sent out for me. I was actually just speaking to a viewer of mine. I think his name was Paul. He's also from over here in Perth, Western Australia. Also from the same part of the world that I'm from, just up near Central Victoria, near Bendigo, and I think he said he was from Kilmore. I'm from Bendigo. He also lived in Melbourne for quite some time, and we both moved over here, and we're both a lot happier over here. There's definitely something about this sunny Western Australian beach lifestyle that's pretty awesome. But what he was saying is that he bought something off Spray Guns Direct, and he was really impressed with the service and the technical advice that they were actually able to supply with the purchase of his. And they I must admit, I've been pretty impressed with their technical knowledge. You know, like even some of the local guys in the paint and paint supplies industry, they don't really know what they're talking about. And yeah, obviously Spray Guns Direct are quite competitive with their prices on all of their stuff, and they do provide a good service as well. Another thing I'd like to make a quick mention of before we do wrap this video up is that, as you noticed, I painted the doors and the guards on this car, and that was only the previous day. So while it did get a bit of a bake, it's probably still going to be a little bit fresh. So before I did leave this one overnight or even bake it, I made sure I ripped that plastic off my fresh paint so it didn't go and sweat, as you can see here. Also, always make sure your cars are dry before you throw plastic on them. I just had a guy tell me that he's gone and ruined a job. Just painted a bumper bar and masked over a wet car, came in the next day, and you've got these sweat marks all over your paint. He tried polishing it up, it looked okay, then a week later you could see all those marks come back. But anyway, I'll leave it at that for this video, guys. Now you've seen this video, get out there and paint some shit. Thanks for watching. This has been another Gunman production. Goodbye.